next speaker is Diana Rayment, who's going to talk about in-shelter behaviour assessments. If temperament tests are out, what do we do now? Diana is a Greyhound behaviour assessor at the Greyhound Adoption Program in Victoria and a companion animal welfare scientist completing her PhD research on canine personality assessments. Diana has more than a decade of experience working with dogs in shelter, training and research settings, as well as teaching about companion animal behaviour and welfare at both university and TAFE level. She has a passion for dogs and the people that love them, or might love them, given the opportunity. Thank you.
There you go. That sounds so nerdy when that is said out loud in a room full of lots and lots of people, but that's okay. So I'll probably change angles a little bit from what you guys have just heard from Liam, which might seem a bit weird given that I'm at the tail end of my PhD in a very similar topic. But what I'm hoping to do is get you guys a little bit excited about the idea of potentially broaching the idea of not using a standardised 1.1 time temperament test. And when I say that to people, and there's a lot of people in the room, I saw all the hands go up, and everybody's like, hey, we use these assessments. They look at me like I've just grown 3 heads and wielding lots and lots of knives, and I've just told them something horrible because I'm telling them to, put dogs out into the community, they're going to eat babies. I'm not telling you to do that at all. We still do absolutely need to assess. We just need to have a bit of a look at how we're doing it. And so what I'm hoping to do today is give you a bit of an impetus to think about those assessments and hopefully get you a little bit excited and give you an idea of what it might look like if you are not using them. So how you might be able to use that actually within your facility or within your foster care program, and what it might look like, and how you can make use of people like myself and Liam and Katina, because as a general rule we tend to be in relatively short supply. So, temperament tests. Hopefully everybody knows the 3 biggies, the 3 main ones that tend to be pulled out and wielded around. So Sue Stanberg, famous assessor hand lady, everybody knows the assessor hand. Meet Your Match, which is probably one of the more data-driven assessments. It's pretty big and it's pretty unwieldy. It's got a very nice front cover face when you go onto the website and start plugging in data, but when you start having a look at the data that's at the back end, it is huge. Like, if you want to go talk data, go talk to Amy Marta, and she will give you data. And also Meet Your Match and Safer. So these are the ones that are probably most common in my experience in a lot of the shelters that are used here in Australia. So, the quick and dirty Safer, and then you expand it out and say, what do you like as a dog with the Meet Your Match? And there's a bunch of stuff that is helpful with these. By and large, they tend to be somewhat feasible. So we talk a lot about the fact that people who are doing them, don't have a lot of experience. It ranges everything from people who have been doing it for 20 years to volunteers who walk into the pound or shelter because they want to help and say, I'm going to assess these dogs. Pick up a piece of paper and start doing it. And so by and large, our focus has always been on let's make this assessment as easy as we can for people who are walking in off the street and doing it. Probably haven't spent enough time thinking about whether or not that's a really realistic goal. You wouldn't walk into a shelter and say to them, it's okay to let somebody walk in off the street and spay a dog, right? For a very good reason, right? People need to know how to do this. They need training, they need experience, and they need to have some type of assessment from people who are outside who are doing it and doing it well to say, yes, you can do it. We probably need to start taking that approach a little bit more with behaviour. We can share the load and we can grab lots of information from all of these different places, and we should be training everybody up. But by and large, you need to have somebody in there, please have somebody in there who has that level of experience, who has, the vet level of experience. Don't send your volunteer in to do a spay. Don't send your, super keen walked in off the street volunteering to make decisions on whether or not a dog lives or dies in your shelter. It's not going to end well. I promise you. I've seen it over and over again, been there, done it, got the ugly t-shirt. So, this is one of the reasons why these assessments don't tend to work. You've heard a bit about this from Liam, so I'm not going to harp on about it. But shelters and pounds vary. They vary a lot. So down in Vic, where I come from, our code of practice says that you need, I think it's 1.2 wide by I think 1.8 long kennel for that dog. It can stay in that kennel for 8 days. You know, you need to do a few things around that, but that's not even remotely close to meeting the minimum guidelines for humane care that are put out by the American Association of Shelter Vets, right? So double-sided guillotine doors, you know, making sure these dogs have got, you know, options. Do I have a soft spot to lay? Do I have a hard spot to lay? Can I go out and interact with people, or can I go back and hang around and be a bit of an introvert? That doesn't happen in most of our shelters. If you're really, really lucky, I happen to be working in an organisation at the moment that has enormous amounts of resources. So yay for us, not so yay for everybody else, but we have, you know, a couple of hundred volunteers. We have, you know, 100+ team of foster carers. We have people who come on site. We have a 40-acre facility. This is great. We can get information from a whole bunch of different things. The local pound down the road, that's 20 minutes drive away, does not have that. So even if I can standardise everything else within that test and get everybody trained up to the same level, everybody's doing a great job of measuring dog behaviour, I still have one dog who's sitting in a code of practice cage and one dog who goes out for a walk on a 40-acre property every other day, yeah? And that matters a lot. Hopefully you got that from Katina's talk. The other part of it is this, and so when I started my PhD, what I thought was our biggest problem is reading behaviour. We have a whole variation of people who are doing these assessments, and it's really, really hard to distill all the knowledge that you need to do them down into just one document. And to help illustrate that, what I want you to do is have a look at these two pictures and tell me the difference, but tell me the difference in like 3 words. Yeah? It's hard, right? So those 2 dogs, they're my dogs. These photos are actually taken within like a fraction of a second from each other. The gross body language is very much so the same. So big Roddy boy is sitting in the back, he's kind of sitting there, he's relatively neutral, he's like, hi, I'm a bit of an idiot. Kelpie boy's like, am I going to get whacked by the idiot? No, I'm not, it's all good. And then he's happy, right? And so the differences there are very, very subtle, but that's one point in time. If we take even a short test, so we're talking something like SAFER, you have 10 minutes full of these moments. And in order to gather that amount of information, pull it together, whack off the light, pull it together, pop it in a document, make it feasible for somebody who needs this level of instruction because I've just walked in off the street, this is a hard task, yeah? So let's make it even harder. What about these guys? So one of those dogs is nice, cool, calm, collected, he's awesome. You'll see a video of him soon where he body slams me, it's great. And then one of them is not so happy. She's a bit worried about it. What's the difference? What are those key bits that you can look at and say, this dog's happy, this dog's sad? Both of their ears are back. They're both laying flat on the ground. One of them's got their paw around, but she's literally just been physically put there, but so has the other dog. They've literally both just been grabbed up and gone bonk on the ground because they're greyhounds, and you can. And they take pretty photos when you do this. But that level of detail in your behaviour, that's what you need to be attending to in every single moment of every single interaction that you have in order for these assessments to be able to give us good information. So I went into my PhD thinking, all right, what happens if we give people more information? Instead of trying to teach them all the little tricks and tips and paying attention to eyebrows, what happens if we strap heart rate monitors onto them and we say, I will give you information about this dog's arousal level, and then that should help you to interpret what's going on with the dog. Because of dogs like this. So, hopefully this works. So how do we all think that dog was faring? We got a 0 and we got a 10. 0 is, I'm all sweet, the world's a great place, and we've got 10, I want to grow opposable thumbs so I can cut my wrists and end it all. Where are we? Where is this dog on that scale? 9, 10, 7, 8. Most people at the right end of the scale, this is good. I've done this before and I've got people telling me 3 and 4, this is the problem, right? So add in the extra information with this. You guys did really, really well. So dog heart rate, resting heart rate, you're looking at 60 to 80. They max out at about 235, 240, mostly. So this guy's top heart rate during that little clip there was 228 beats per minute. His average was 196. The absolute bottom level, which was right at the end there, If you're watching that video closely, you could see that moment where he went, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Oh, thank God the noise has stopped. I don't think I'm going to die anymore. And then his heart rate started coming back down. He was up there peaking, and this particular dog had a couple of sounds that really, really stressed him out, a few times in a row. And we actually thought we were going to pull the plug on that assessment because he was so bad that we're like, okay, he's not recovering, this is a problem. Now, this dog, the information that we got back from this dog's owner was that he's okay with noises. Sometimes he's selectively deaf. He goes and he sits in the corner during a storm. I walk him down the road. It's all well and good, and he just kind of goes and sits in a corner. And by and large, that plays out, even in the shelter world, yeah? So this isn't just my assessment either. So very, very fantastically, so back in 2004, Taylor and Mills went, hey guys, you probably should be doing some more stats on these assessments that you're putting out. And very, very handily, so an Italian group in 2011, I think it was, Valsecchi, put out their very first fully validated protocol. And what they found was that these big overt behaviours, so they had 4 assessors, 2 people that had awesome amounts of education behind them and had spent a decade plus studying behaviour, and then 2 people walked in off the street, got tested. These big overt behaviours, good, everybody read them, good, no worries. Happy behaviours, so behaviours that are based on what we call positive affect. So the dog's A-OK, he's actually coping really, really well, he's happy, he's sociable. Those things tended to actually be predictable. So if they're being, behaving in this socially, pro-social way, even in a stressful environment, take them out of the stressful environment, they're still friendly. We have a fair idea of why this is, The other end of the scale, not so much. The passive behaviours, even the guys that had heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of experience still couldn't reach consensus. So if the dog's just sitting there and he's not doing much, is he happy? Is he calm? Is he freaking out but he's just passive? Who knows? So extra information's good, but it'll only get you so far. And where I ended up was wondering, does this, all things considered, we could get the best information we possibly can, does what the dog is actually doing in that room predict what happens outside of the room? And by and large, the answer is not exceptionally well. So some things they do, if they're happy and you bring them in and they go through those first few days in the shelter environment, particularly if they're stray, they get picked up by a stranger, shoved in a strange car, sometimes taken to a strange person's house, locked in a laundry, pulled out, taken to a shelter, popped in the shelter, given the once over, hopefully, by a vet or somebody to make sure they're physically okay. That's a pretty big thing. If you've got a dog going through all of that and they're still being social and they're not showing any of these reactive behaviours, they're doing A-OK. You probably don't need to worry too much about this dog, right? The other end of the scale, this is a bit more information that we need. So the other thing that popped up was this. One of these videos that I'll show you, this dog scored 0s or 1s on stranger-directed fear and stranger-directed aggression. The other dog scored 3 and 4. Tell me which one they are. So you probably can't see it very well. That's a coolie that's pinning herself to the ground behind my chair. Now, other dog. Now, have a guess which one's the fearful one. The black one, right? Everybody goes, the coolie. The coolie's freaking out. It's losing its style. It has a history of trying to bite a vet. It tried to bite its owner about 10 minutes before we took that video. It tried to bite me. And I say tried to bite, it snapped vaguely in my direction and didn't actually try and make any contact because it was going, please just leave me alone so I can go away. She scored 0 to 1. So her owner scored her 0 to 1. And by and large, whenever that dog is pressured, she just does nothing. So according to a lot of tests, she scores really, really well. Looking at her, you'd go, oh, good Lord, she's actually really, really afraid. This is a dog we need to be concerned about. But if you just look at the letter of the law, according to a lot of tests, she's not doing a lot, right? And because she's not doing a lot, the assumption is that she's okay. Other girl, the moment she gets a fright, goes, oh, good God, and she's barking and she's doing all these things. She's having this huge behavioural reaction, so she scores really, really badly. But she goes, oh, whoa, what the hell just happened? And then goes, oh, it's nothing, sorry, bit of a lump. And then she goes on and she has a day. And she's really, really social, you know, awesome dog. Not a dog we need to worry about at all, but scores badly. And then when I sat down and actually had a bit more of a chat with these owners, what I find out is that box cross girl, lives in suburbia, goes out every day, you know, every now and again sees a dog or a person or whatever that spooks her a bit, has this massive big reaction. She thinks this dog is problematic. Coolie dog, lives on a property, a few hundred acres with a few other coolies, meets new people multiple times a week. They come to the property, all the other dogs are around it together, never shows any fear. According to that owner, this dog is not fearful of strangers. She sees this dog interacting with strangers multiple times a week. It runs up, it goes, hi, how are you? It's got its whole body wiggling, it's, you know, fantastic. It's throwing himself at strangers. Take it off the property, get rid of its mates. All of a sudden we've got a very, very different dog on our hands, yeah? So this is a dog who's problematic at the vet, but for 99.9% of her life is great, not a problem. Owner doesn't care that she's potentially going to bite a vet because the vet knows how to deal with this. Probably should care that it's going to bite the vet and that it's not having a good time at the vet. But this is a manageable problem once you know what the dog is like outside of this environment. So this is the thing. This is the crux of it. What are we actually assessing when we're looking at this? And the answer is behaviour. Yeah. So over time, over a lot of different, you know, measurement points, lots of context, lots of different people, lots of different input, we can get a feel for behavioural patterns and we can say, hey, cool, what actually are you like as a dog? What are the things that, oh, that totally just randomly did that on its own. But when we're just measuring one single thing, we're measuring behaviour and we don't do it particularly well. All of those other blue balloons that you see around there are all those things that are affecting behaviour. Temperament, what's the genetic potential of that dog? Yeah, so you think of it like one of those big old-fashioned mixer boards, you know, the big DJ ones with all the slides on it? Right, so you've got your genetic potential, which is, you know, 70 to 100 on that slide. This is what the dog comes with. The moment it's conceived, all the things that are going on within its mum's body are affecting that genetic potential. It comes out, it learns, it's hungry, it's stressed. All of these things are affecting the behaviour that you see, yeah? And so whenever you're actually taking information about it, you need to be working out, what am I actually seeing? What's the context that I'm actually seeing this behaviour in? Not just, is this behaviour scary to me, or do I think this behaviour could be risky? All of these things are playing into it. Go back to the coolie, you know what I mean? She's terrified. Take her home, she's fine. She's a socialite. She'll probably try and climb into your jumper and lick your face, yeah? So context is a big thing. Now, these are all pictures of my Kelpie. I love my Kelpie, can you tell? So, all pictures of him, all bar one of those are at home. Probably the big key theme to this is that he really hates having a camera stuck in his face. So you'll see there's very few pictures there where he's actually really happy, tongue lolling out, I'm great with the world, because I'm like, picture, and you all know how that feels, so it's okay. But you know, just had major surgery, got his ball, happy dog, just had major surgery, smashed off his dial on pain relief. Lovely dog. Down the bottom going, oh good God, is the idiot Rottweiler going to bash me again? All at home, all with the same people around him. But the context has changed so slightly and that gives us a different picture of who he is. It's only once you get all the pictures together you actually get a feel for who he is, right? So, context. It's a big deal, yeah? If you grab a dog in those first few days, or you grab a dog who's not coping in your environment for whatever reason, and then you poke it, bad things are probably going to happen. And you know what? Sometimes that's okay. We have bad days. I get up at the end of the week when I've, you know, had a bad week with the other half or at work or whatever, and somebody comes into me and goes, hey, sorry, I stole the chocolate off your desk last night because I really, really wanted it. And I'm like, damn you, I haven't eaten breakfast. I've been awake since 4 o'clock. I could stab you with a fork right now. You know, and everybody goes, all right, okay, I can understand that. You know, you're having a bad week, it's Friday morning, somebody just took your chocolate, right? Sometimes we have bad days and bad days are understandable and that's okay. But we seem to have this thing where it's like a dog is never allowed to have a bad day. They are, right? They are, they can communicate that to us. It doesn't make they're a serial killer. So, the theory behind this, I won't go into this too much. There's a bunch in the paper, and if you get really, really excited by it, I've got a lit review that was published in 2015 that you can read. I apologise in advance, it's really long and it's kind of boring. Wasn't written specifically for, practitioners. But the crux of it is, when you feel good, we tend to see a lot of behaviour, yeah? And so when you're feeling really okay about the world, you see a lot of stuff, you tend to be pretty resistant to the bad stuff, and you tend to see a lot of the good stuff. You feel bad, all the good stuff gets suppressed, yeah? Good stuff gets suppressed, bad stuff gets escalated. Now, as Katina was saying with this, the pancakes, the trigger stacking, in the environment that we're normally assessing these dogs in, there's lots and lots of pancakes, right? You take the dog out, stack a few pancakes, poke it, go, oh, I think I saw something I didn't like, poke it, poke it, poke it, poke it. Eventually it turns around and goes, get the hell away from me. And you go, see, told ya. And you're like, well, would you do this to somebody who's having a bad day on a Friday morning? Hopefully not, yeah? And so this rather ugly looking graph basically tells us about this a little bit. So on the vertical axis, you've got arousal. So what's the body doing? Is the body asleep or is the body ready to do something? So you're highly aroused or you're relaxed. And left to right is what we call valence. How does it feel emotionally? Yeah. So you're feeling good or you're feeling bad? Now, if I'm really highly aroused and I'm happy, then chances are I'll probably make a few stupid decisions like, jumping down 3 flights of stairs, going and drinking too much, doing whatever it is that you're going to do. If you're feeling nice and relaxed, it's cool, you're probably thinking well, you can choose your responses really, really well. Flick over to the negative side. You've got sad, depressed, fearful, you're far more likely to snap, you're far more likely to have a bad day, and you're probably far less likely to go play canasta. Yeah? Everybody gets it? Sweet. So, this guy, this is why I do what I do. This is why I've been doing it for a long time. So when I started at Gap back in January, this guy had come back to our kennels. He'd actually been in there for a little while, and he was labelled not adoptable because of this. And it looks really bad, right? People see it and they go, ooh, he didn't even give a warning. Now, I looked at it and went, how many times has this dog actually touched skin? Because he's been here a long time, he's had lots of opportunities to get at people. How many times has he actually touched anybody's skin? Never. When he has touched something, so he's gone at somebody's boot or he's gone at the fake hand, how many times has he actually grabbed? So grabbed and bitten down? Never. How many times has he been assessed with that hand? Officially about 6. Unofficially, a few of the kennel staff decided they want to do some work with him, which is great. We want them to do some work with him, but we want them to do work with him in the right way. So by the time I met this guy, he was like, anytime somebody came near that kennel door with a hand, he was like, rightio, I totally know how to get rid of you. I just got to turn around and pull some ugly faces and snap in your direction and off you go. And that was obviously problematic. We can't just throw a dog like that out into society. So went and chatted to the boss and said, hey, can we do some work with this guy? I don't think he's actually problematic. I'm definitely not happy to make a decision about whether or not he's adoptable. 3 days later, after some counter conditioning work, he's like, oh, do you want my food bowl? Have my food bowl. We're playing games in his kennel. So outdoor kennel, walk in, throw the dog some chicken, throw him some chicken. I will not lie to you, the first 2 days that dog had a really big meal, right? In my brain, I have Trish's thing from last time, better a fat dog than a dead dog. And I'm like, you know what? Whatevs. If you want food, I will give you food. You can have your bowl, and then I'll have another bowl full of even more awesome food. Let's play chuck games. Walk up, chuck the food, walk away. 3rd day, he's like, hey, you've got chicken, and you've got black pudding. Black pudding is like crack, right? So he's just like, yay, black pudding, whoa. And that's it. He's just off his dial. Happy dog. Great with me. Get a few of the other staffers to do it. All of a sudden, this dog's like, oh, yay, somebody's coming to feed me, excellent. We don't see this behaviour, but we still see it near the kennel door. We still see it with a few of the staff members who have had a lot more experience with this dog over a period of time. And this is where I went, are we going to be able to generalise this? Took him out and sent him to a foster home, obviously the right foster home. Didn't just pull him out and send him out into the world with whoever. So this picture is him on his first day at a foster home. He'd been in the kennels for I think about 3 or 4 months by that stage, so he'd actually been in there a long time and he was pretty stressed, but he was very passive about his stress. So first day he looked a bit shell-shocked, and this particular home environment, he'd never been in a home environment. 3 days later though, this happened. So Lucky realised that Lucky has a personality, right? And we all went, wow, Lucky really does have a personality. And the really cool thing about this is, this Lucky, after spending 3 weeks with his foster carer, came back to the shelter. So he went out, the dog who is angsty and shut down and not very good, came back into the shelter like, oh cool, not only are you coming to feed me, you're going to play tag games with me, and doing zoomies, yeah? This is a good thing. Awesome. Did we do we literally did 3 days worth of work with this dog. The foster carer did some stuff, she followed some rules, but this is what happened just by taking him out of the shelter environment, right? This is not a high-risk dog. He looks ugly, he's not a high-risk dog, yeah? And obviously he went to a home and we have followed up. We do a lot of follow-up data, not a problem. Even those first few days that he went home and we went, oh, you could see a problem, fine. He fitted in like a glove, they're like, this is the best dog ever. I'm like, told you. So, when do you know not to assess? Anytime that you've got a dog in your care, and the same thing goes for cats, but cats are just a whole other scale, but I'm obviously talking about dogs. Anytime they're showing you signs that they're not coping well in your environment, this is not the time to be assessing these animals. You can look at them and say, okay, in this particular context, this is how you're coping. But you know, you've got excessive vocalizations, you've got dogs who are becoming more and more reactive at barriers and at fences, you've got dogs who are bouncing around, like that video that Katina showed, the dog, doing laps in the front of its teeny little kennel. We don't do things with a dog that's in this environment. Change this environment, get the dog into a headspace where you can actually see who they are, and then start gathering information. Don't wait till that point to start gathering information, please. But this is the ugly list. I'm not going to put up pictures of all the things that could look bad, but hopefully you guys are already, and if you're not, please do start tracking the welfare of the animals that are in your care. So, what do you do when you don't have the test? Everybody's like, give us the test, give us the test. And basically the answer is you get more information, yeah? So what we need is information from multiple time points, in multiple contexts, from multiple people. You need good information. What did the dog do? What was the context that it did it in? And you need somebody who can take that information and make sense of it. But you go. This person come in. I will come back to that slide. That's when I got slide swiped by Skiff. You basically get information from the moment that dog enters your facility. Somebody found that dog. Chances are they picked it up off the road, they put it in their car in a confined space, they probably took it home if it was out of hours, and they couldn't either get it to a facility or get the rangers to come pick it up. They've had it. It's probably met their pets. It's probably met several new people. Get information from these people and get good information, not just what street did you find the dog in. That could be good because that's a way that you could hopefully go find the owners. But what did the dog do while it was with you? It could have been with you for 2-3 days sometimes. That the whole, I found him, he was really cute, and he was obviously abused because he was a bit scared, so I kept him for 3 days before we bring him into the shelter. Okay, cool, you've got 3 days worth of information that we can use. Get it. Your kennel staff and your volunteers, they are with these dogs a lot. Usually your behaviour people are spread really, really thin. So you might have 100 dogs in your facility. If you've got somebody there 7 hours a day, you've got a few minutes a dog at most. So you can dedicate those few minutes a day to, all of the dogs and trying to assess in 5 minutes and make it as quick and dirty as you possibly can and hope that it works. Or you can get information from your kennel staff and let them tell you who the dogs are that actually need some help and then focus. You're the one who's got the extra resources, you've got the extra knowledge. Good, go use it with the dogs who need it. And collect good information from your kennel staff, yeah? And your vet staff. So, the best proxy for not using, a safer or a meet your match or an assessor hand, talk to the vet that had to do something, the vet nurse that had to do something with this dog because they brought it into a clinic, they picked it up, they restrained it, usually around the face. If they had to dissex it, they had to raise veins, they had to put needles in this dog and inject stuff and all sorts of things are going on. And they're placed in a really good position to tell you whether that behaviour is out of the norm. They see these dogs all the time, right? So, and hopefully those vets have got some experience out in private practice too, so they know what dogs do when they come into a vet clinic. If the dog turns around and tried to rip the vet's face off, I don't need to go and sit down in a room and do a safer assessment to know that this is something that needs to be looked into more, yeah? So if you just get that information from your vet, you've already got it. You've got a proxy test. It's not necessarily going to happen the same way everywhere, but guess what? The dog's going to go into a vet outside, and these things are going to happen to it outside too. Relinquishing owners, this is the big one. And there's lots of different ways that you can get information from relinquishing owners. So CBUC, James Appel and the guys from over in the US have put together this little short version of their assessment tool. You've got the standard release forms. Let's get these people to fill out as much paperwork as we can. Hopefully that it convinces them to keep their dog. That was sarcasm. Don't hold that against me in the future. But ideally, what you'd have is people who are actually trained up and ready to go and have a conversation with these people. So whenever I say to people, get information from relinquishing owners, the first thing they say is, but they lie. And I'm like, how do you know that? How can you possibly, sometimes you go, oh, but if the dog who's really super friendly with strangers at home and gets into the kennel and just loses it, they might not be lying. That dog might be A-okay in a home environment, yeah? But if you sit down and you have a face-to-face conversation with him and you're open with him and you actually say, hey, what's going on? What's brought you here? You can get a lot of information from them. That information is really, really useful because that's a completely different context from what you're ever going to see. Yeah? Behaviour stuff. So this is a quick and dirty thing that I put together when we started doing the food stuff with Lucky back in January, and I haven't fixed it yet. But have this information there. If you've got behaviour mod going on, day-to-day track. So have some scale that we can assess, exactly like Katina said, and also have space for people to put notes and tell them what those notes should look like. So what are you doing? What behaviour are you seeing? What was the context? He was all good until I reached down and stuck my finger in his food in the bowl. Yeah, everything was all good. He was happy, expectant. I touched it. He got still. He turned around and gave me a dirty look like, if you keep doing that, we're going to have a conversation. All right, cool. This is something that we can work with. And your foster carers. So please, 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 one, prepare your foster carers well. They do a lot of work for us, and they're probably a bit of an unspoken group in a lot of circles when we're talking about things like capacity fatigue and burnout. They do a lot. They get attached to these dogs and they start to learn about these dogs. They know a lot about these dogs in an environment that's completely different from the shelter. So develop a system that can actually get you good information from these foster carers. Just with that, right, if a dog makes it through these systems and they're doing well, you can streamline that dog and you can get it back out. It comes in, does its mandatory hold, you go, you've had your vet check, you've hopefully gone, and I'll quickly show you that video while I'm talking because I'm running out of time. You've hopefully seen it in an environment like this. So that brindle guy, his name is Mickey. We did our assessments with the small dogs and realised that Mickey is a jerk. So he can play nice when he wants to, but if the other dog doesn't, who just doesn't tell him to stop being a jerk, he just doesn't. And so what we wanted to see with this is if we pulled him out and we popped him with a couple of other greyhounds, so Skiff, who's just about to body slam me, thanks Skiff, he was like our, super dependable gentleman dog who would ramp up his play if somebody wanted to ramp up, and he'd also chill out if somebody was a bit, take a little while to come out of their shell. So we literally pulled Mickey out, put him in with Skiff and said, okay, what happens? And the answer was not much, because Skiff turned around and went, dude, don't be a jerk. And then we pulled out Sabrina, the big white girl, and said, hey, she's a pretty tough player. Are they actually going to fire up? So when they get together and they start playing Let's Touch Livers, are we going to see this escalation, or does it turn out that they both actually have some good control over the way they're interacting? It turns out they were great. So it turns out Mickey does have social skills. He just chooses when he uses them. But you've got, your vet check. You've got hopefully some type of interactions with other dogs. You know what the dog is like from your kennel staff. You know what the dog... Oh, I'll be quick. You know what the dog is like with the people working in the shelter. Hopefully you've got systems in place to flag that bad behaviour when you see it, or the unwanted behaviour when you see it, so that you can go and interact it more. But if a dog gets through that system and they're doing pretty well, you've got a good feel for that dog. You don't need safer, yeah? Use your time more wisely. This is okay. We don't need to be scared about going, throw away the assessor hand, because we don't necessarily need it. Yeah? And I do have some pretty groovy slides of greyhounds trying to kill little dogs, but I'm not going to show you those because we've run out of time. Excellent.
And if we could now invite our speakers from the last session onto the stage. If anyone's got some questions, if you wanted to start coming forward to the mics. So we've got, it's very bright up here. So questions? We've got a question here. Yes.
Hi, my question is for Joy. So feral cats, are they included in your zero healthy rate of euthanasia?
Yes, they are. So the council bring in the trapped cats to the pound. We manage the pound for the Gold Coast City Council and care for all the animals there. So the cats that are brought into the pound are therefore in our care. We do as much as we possibly can to get them out of the traps as quickly as possible, to assess them, to try to work through processes where we can socialise them. So that 8% of cats and dogs that are still being euthanised are ones that our staff, vets and behaviourists, have actually found that no matter how much they tried, they haven't been able to get to a stage where they're either not really suffering themselves or not able to be trusted, in the sense of if they were put out into the community, they would probably do damage to somebody else or another cat or a dog. So, I mean, internationally, saving over 90% is considered a pretty good go. And we know that we would like to progress even further. It'd be nice to get to, I don't think zero is possible, but it'd be nice to get to 95%. But we're happy that, well, we are comfortable with the fact that we worked out, and I believe I'm speaking for the staff. A lot of the people who do the assessment over here probably should be speaking here too, that we put enough time and effort into, as much as we possibly can, identifying that we can save as many of those little cats that have never had the opportunity to be socialised well, to get them through.
So your main strategy there is socialising them as best you can so they can be rehomed?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yes,
Sorry.
that's right.
I just
So
wondered if you had
particularly
any
the
extra
kittens are
tips.
usually pretty easy. We have some amazing staff and volunteers who actually can manage usually to socialise the kittens within the shelter environment even. Some of them definitely do go out on foster as well. With the adults, of course, it is more difficult, and some don't make it. They're the ones in the 8%. But the majority of them are given that opportunity to demonstrate that they can work towards being socialised and then put out into foster care. And we have some amazing foster carers who can turn around a cat that nobody can handle, and within 4 weeks, I had one in my bathroom that just kept retreating from me and would not come forward out of its little cage. And I was at work every day. It was impossible for me to try to do it, and I wasn't very skilled. She went home to one of our amazing feral cat foster carers, as a lot of you in rescue know. And within a week, that cat was in her arms, and within 4 weeks, that cat was rehomed.
Thank you.
Yes.
And can I just, is this on?
Yes.
It's a bit high for me. Stand on, Jack. I'm going to talk about a little bit tomorrow, or quite a bit tomorrow, but I'd really encourage everyone in Australia to be aware of their terminology. And I think we need to be using feral to define cats that truly have no support from humans for food or shelter. And based on the cat tracking data from South Australia, that's probably a cat that's about 3 to 5 kilometres from the closest human habitation. So that makes it easy for animal control officers to try and distinguish, is this cat likely to be an urban or peri-urban cat or a feral cat? For the cats that are predominantly coming into shelters that are poorly socialised, they are urban and peri-urban cats that are getting fed often by people that don't perceive they own them. They're getting some food and shelter from people. And if we keep calling them feral, they're going to be included in the feral pest programs where they have to be killed. And there's better ways to manage them. So if we can keep feral to be cats that get no food or support from humans, they're in the bush, they require science to manage them, to protect our wildlife. We're talking about a lot more cats that are in urban cities that are being killed, and we're killing about 3 to 5% of the stray cat population every year in pounds and shelters. So I'd encourage you to look at your language when you're talking to people. In North America, it's not a problem because they haven't demonised cats. Our commissioner, or the threatened species and, threatened endangered species, they actually have a mandate to convince the Australian public of the need to kill cats. And that's why we've had this demonisation. If you talk to conservationists, dogs in urban areas are more destructive for wildlife and kill more. But we like dogs, and we've demonised cats. So if we just watch our language, I think we're going to get more progress.
Eileen?
I have a question for Diana, please. Oh, sorry, or is it Diane? Diana. My take-home message from your talk was spend your time, the same as Petronic and Bradley, spend your time more wisely than doing temperament tests. Can I ask then, how are Greyhound Adoption Program Victoria using their time wisely regarding temperament testing and socialisation?
No, it's on? Okay, cool. So, again, we're probably pretty lucky compared to most pounds and shelters because greyhounds as a breed have a very low incidence of aggression. So even prior to me getting there, they actually weren't doing any assessments, structured assessments, other than stuff with small dogs to look for predatory behaviour, which was those funky videos I was going to show you. We do a pre-assessment, so we actually managed intake. We do a pre-assessment on these dogs to see how they respond to small dogs, where we literally just introduce them to small dogs and get everybody running around together and see what happens, safely. And then we look at how they interact. So our assessors are actually the people who go out and do that. We then follow up the following day or within the next couple of days. Most of those forms that are pictures that I had up are actually ours. So we've got 3 different forms that are up on the kennels for the kennel staff and volunteers to use. One about the dog's personality. So the ASPCA's got this really nice template for writing adoption profiles, like how to write a really great dating profile. It's like, this is what I love, you know. So there's literally boxes for each of those things. And then some other stuff about how the dogs respond. And then we get information back from the vet. So, and then if at that stage any of the dogs show up as this is a dog we need to do some more work with, then we'll actually, the behaviour team will go down and have a look at it and say, okay, what's all the information that we've got telling us about this dog? If it's all going well at that stage, we literally make the dog available for adoption and it goes out. So we do have the luxury of having a population of dogs that have a very, very low incidence of aggression, which probably makes it a bit easier to get all these things happening. But by and large, I think even for most dogs, if you put them through those first few days in any type of shelter kind of environment and they're not showing up as problematic, you can streamline them through. And so, does that answer?
What's your pre-selection failure rate?
It varies a bit. So we take in around 45 dogs a week, and we normally knock back for predation primarily between 5 and 12 of those. So we book in 45 and then are knocking back a few. They're not necessarily crazy predatory dogs, but they're dogs who we think are not good dogs who we can actually just take into the program and keep working through at that point. They need a little bit more work before we can get them in because our aim is to have a nice short length of stay and obviously to minimise the resources. So we're taking in 30 to 35 dogs a week, and then our live release rate is, last time I looked, about 93%. So we've got the luxury of managed intake, which is awesome for us, but our euthanasia rate is low, and it has been low for a really long time. So long before I came along, we've just streamlined it a bit. Yeah, does that make sense?
Kim?
I've got 3 questions because apparently you have to be quite brave to stand up here. So I'm quite happy to take this round to somebody else if they have other questions. What happened? Where were the babies coming down the river? You didn't finish the parable.
Sorry, I mean it's really just it's a metaphor for find the source of any problem. So I don't know what they were.
Oh, nobody ever said, no, there was no end to that particular story.
No, there's not a particular end. It really is just about find the source of the problem and address that rather than looking
I
at
thought maybe somebody was taking the babies and just putting them in the water again.
I don't know.
Could be.
I don't know. Maybe it was cheap babysitting. We'll just send this one down the river. Someone will look after it.
Cheap
Maybe
way to get your
someone
kid to the
upstream needed
HSC.
spay.
Sorry?
But it really is, for us, it's really just an example of, the work we do in rescue is very valuable and time-consuming and exhausting and all those sorts of things. And really, we need to look at the bigger picture, and we need to find out why this is happening and what we could be doing on a larger scale to prevent. So prevention rather than cure.
So then my next question was for the Queensland. You're not doing any trap, neuter, release or whatever the current of the cats who are basically unhappy to be with people, which is the peri-urban type cats. So the ones you were calling feral. Do you do trap, neuter, release with those?
We have.
Yeah, it's on.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. We actually haven't had. We've done a little bit of experimenting with it, but we haven't done that in a big way. We are hoping. I've been working with Jackie because we manage the pounds in Brisbane as well, to do a bit of work on a research project in Brisbane, and we have just been waiting for the opportunity to work with the Gold Coast City Council as well on hopefully a research project with what we want to call trap, desex, adopt or return and support. TADA's a new term for Australia. But we haven't had to do a lot of that in our city. We seem to have been able to gradually reduce the euthanasia rate by working with the cats that come in. But certainly we have assisted some individuals who are working with those animals to desex them and return them for them. But we haven't had a major issue. I mean, when you look at the whole city, the population of the whole city, the proportion of animals, I guess there are certainly small areas where people are working on trap, neuter, release, and we assist them with desexing, definitely, through our desexing programs, rather than take them in ourselves.
Is it currently illegal in Queensland? TNR?
That's correct, yes. Yes, so that's another area where, just as Jackie was saying before, we need to work with all state governments for changing the definitions, the legislation, so that urban strays can be classified as separate from cats in remote areas that have never had contact with humans. And at least then we have the support of most communities to try and help those cats. And, we've used foster carers, and obviously people are out there in the community that we support with desexing to do that work. So it's just a matter of changing definitions. We just all need to work on in our respective states to do that.
My final question was, because I'm interested in cats, do you do any behavioural assessments of cats, and have you ever followed up the little, scared stray who takes ages to come out and then gets confident and then is given to another family? Have you ever followed them up over a couple of years to see what happens?
I guess it would be better if our staff was addressing this, but yes, they do follow up and often keep contact, and we do encourage people to call us back and give us information as much as we possibly can. So I wouldn't say we follow up every cat, but we do follow them up regularly, and a lot of staff are very committed to those cats once we put all that time and effort into it. And so those individual staff members often on their own bat follow up to find out how that particular cat is going. And we just get amazing stories back about, normally, like we have, just give you a quick example. There was a little cat, two little cats that came in that were really, really very unsocialised and really wild. And a lady came in who had two little children and said she would like to really help one of these unsocialised cats. And we were really nervous about that. How would that end up? With two little children. One of them was quite a wild little boy who was racing around the corridors of the cat place and our cat rehoming centre. And the next thing, when we followed up with her, she'd send us photos of how she had little cardboard boxes lined with rugs in the room with her little infants, and she obviously could train her little infants because these little kittens were there. Little cats were sitting in the box, still hiding a little bit but looking up over the top, and the little one sitting beside on the floor. She did an amazing job, and before we knew it, that they were getting on really well, and she had the little children with the cats on their laps and everything. So,
Because the reason that I ask is that I've ended up following a lot of these cats over a lifetime, and I found that the little I call them the purring pessimists. They're the ones that just sit on your lap and purr and purr and purr and purr. I don't know if they're, asking the cat god to save them yet again, because, like a guinea pig, it's not if you're going to get eaten, it's only when. And most of them ended up with, if the environment ever changed, they started peeing around the house. And we had numbers of litters that did that. And these were the cats that were brought in from, like, hospitals. So they were the strays on the edge of the environment who didn't want to be all that close to people, and they were brought in, and the kittens were then socialised and homed out, and they turned out to be fairly unhappy over their, well, if they lasted past the 3 years pissing on the head of the owner, they led a fairly terrified life. If there was any change. If it was a very stable environment, then they were okay, but when they moved or someone else moved in or out, Prozac in the water for everybody.
I guess as we've been talking about here, it can just depend on the environment in which they're placed, as well as the cat, and
it would be
so
interesting
it's a whole detailed, complicated issue about where they are and who they're with and their complete background and so on. But overall, we feel like that it is possible and that we are being successful, and we're very careful to make sure those animals do have quality of life.
Yeah, so if you just, when they get their stories, if they document them, because it's okay to piss on things, if you just warn the owners that may happen, then it's not off to the, off to somewhere else that you don't hear about. We used to hear about them because we'd say, look, any problems, talk to us. But if you don't ask the question in the right way, even when they bring their animals in for their cats in for me to, do health checks and stuff, they wouldn't say about the peeing unless asked, or the husband would come in and say, this is the end, this is absolutely the end.